Thank you for joining us on Student Docs. I'm Carole Adrienne. Today we present an episode of the Relentless series from the Social Justice Documentary Program at Villanova University. The opioid epidemic is one of the greatest health crises in America today. This four-part series examines several recovery options: medical, behavioral, and spiritual. Today's presentation introduces NARP, the Narcotic Addiction Rehabilitation Program, a form of replacement therapy with a long-time track record. My guest today is Dr. John O'Leary, co-director of the Social Justice Documentary Program. John, thank you very much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, I've been wondering how this program, which has gone on for 9 years now, was
I think
begun.
10 actually.
Oh, 10.
Yeah.
How did it start?
Well, I've been teaching at Villanova for 22 years, and conversations with one of my colleagues, he knew that so many Villanova students were interested in social justice issues, and quite a number of Villanova students were also interested in exploring those issues through the use of video and film. So we thought maybe we could create a class that combined those two things. So we went to Villanova, and nobody knew exactly what to do with what we proposed, because it's 6 credits in the spring and 6 credits in the fall and 9 in the spring, which is quite a bit to dedicate, but we knew we needed that time in order for them to do quality pieces. So since then, you know, we've had a lot of success. There are 2 sections now, and the movies have been officially admitted to film festivals all over the country, all over the world, and won many awards. We've had 4 of the films were finalists for the Student Academy Awards. So it's been a great program for our students.
And the students do not have to come exclusively from the communication program.
That's correct. Yeah, the students can come from any major at the university. So we've had nursing students, we've had engineering students, psychology majors, political science majors, business majors. The students come from everywhere. Some students have never touched a camera before, but they come into our program, and I'm thinking of one young student who had never touched a camera, and she wound up working on her first film, and then we made her the director of the next film we did.
Wow. Well, they certainly have acquired some wonderful skills, because the quality of the documentaries is very high and the stories are absolutely compelling.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, they work very, very hard on these films.
Well, it shows, and we're going to see the first one now. So this is actually the second film in the series on NARP, and we're going to take a look at it now.
Okay, terrific.
When I hurt my shoulder, you know, the doctor gave me pain medication, and that was my first experience with the pills. And then it got worse and worse and worse. I was in my friend's house. It's about 10 o'clock at night. I had just did my last drug. I had no money, no stuff, I had no way to get any more. And I almost killed myself, to be honest with you. That was my low point. I couldn't get no lower.
2 years ago, that's when I started snorting the dope, and it had fentanyl in it. And I didn't know it had fentanyl in it. And my daughter came, and I was in the bathroom, like just out of it. And she came and called the paramedics. They came and took me to the hospital. They gave me Narcan. And that's what brought me out of it. I OD'd, and I just don't want to go back that way. I don't want that journey. I want to live. I'm 60 years old, I want to live.
I wasn't always for methadone, you know, I didn't really want to get involved with that because of the things that I heard. You know, it's like liquid handcuffs, they say. You know, you live your life around that, you know, you can't do anything, you get addicted to that, you got to go every day. But eventually, my addiction and my situation got so bad that I was, at the time I was desperate, and I really wanted to stop.
Well, I'm taking methadone now, and I didn't take methadone before. The 12-step worked for me for 30-something years, but then it didn't work after that. NARP works for me now.
So NARP stands for the Narcotic Addict Rehabilitation Program, and it's an outpatient, community-based treatment program operated by Thomas Jefferson University since 1972. So it values research as a guiding principle in the services that it delivers. But as I said, it's a community-based treatment program dealing with opioid addiction.
We really encourage MAT because it's much safer to be on MAT than to continue using substances. So we've done studies and randomized controlled trials and found that it has proven efficacious to improve work performance, work productivity, decrease crime, decrease rates of hepatitis C, HIV, and methadone is certainly the longest existing medication-assisted therapy.
It has been widely researched for many, many years and has proven results for helping people change their lives. Methadone is a liquid medication, and so our patients come to a medication window every day, and the nurses dispense according to what your dose is.
As replacement therapy, methadone is an agonist, and what that means is it fills the receptor sites in the brain for the individual who's opioid dependent, thereby preventing the withdrawal syndrome that you would see if those receptor sites were left empty. But unlike heroin or a lot of other opioids, it doesn't have sedating effects. So if you're effectively dosed, you're not going to see the typical nodding and sort of falling asleep that you see somebody who's dependent on opioids. And the other important thing is it has a half-life of 24 to 36 hours before any withdrawal or cravings set in.
When you first start going to the clinic, you're going every day. And you go and you get your medication there every single day. And then you start IOP, which is intensive outpatient. It's a lot of groups, a lot of talk therapy, which in my opinion is absolutely necessary for medication treatment. You can't have one without the other. It's not just going to be a magic cure. You're not going to get on methadone and be like, oh yeah, everything's fine now. You really have to do the legwork with it. I was diagnosed with a medical condition, and when I was about 11 years old, pain medication was used to treat this condition. They put me on heavy narcotics, which now they wouldn't do, but back then that was kind of the norm because they were pushing opiates on many people, and I became dependent on them at first and didn't realize it, and then I became addicted to the opioid medications. When that stopped being an option, I got very sick, went into extreme withdrawal, and that's when I was onto heroin because the doctors would not prescribe anymore. I went from being enrolled in college. I was a couple credits away from graduating, and finally ended up being homeless, on the streets, prostitution. I was in and out of jail. Anything that could go wrong pretty much went wrong from there. It was a very dark place. This is the park that I used to use that I slept in for many, many months when I was out on the street. There really was no night and day. It just was get as much money as you can, as fast as you can, to get as much drugs as you could. It was pretty bleak. I used to walk around here at 3 o'clock in the morning, and now being here makes me hesitant, but I don't really mind coming back because it does show me the progress that I've made so far. I really don't know what changed exactly, other than I was just done. It was time. I was either going to die or I was going to get out fighting. And thankfully, my stepmother and my father took me in and just kind of sheltered me from the storm and took real good care of me for a long time. MAT has worked for me because it allowed me to finally quiet down that voice that was feeding my addiction, enough for me to slow down and start making progress towards real recovery.
Is an individual who is on medication-assisted treatment in recovery? I would argue absolutely. They are in recovery, they're abstinent, and they're successful. These are individuals who have a chronic disease. If you have someone who is diabetic, you're not going to deny them insulin and say, taking insulin, you haven't recovered. If you're hypertensive and you're taking a beta blocker and your blood pressure's under control, am I going to say, well, we're going to take the beta blocker away from you because you're not abstinent? To try and deny an individual a medication that they need to be productive, to lead a safe and healthy life, I think is foolish. I think it's naive. And I think is really problematic. And I, for one, wouldn't do that. So is basically administering methadone replacing one addictive substance with another? The answer is no.
People do get methadone on the street and they misuse it, and therefore it can get a bad rap. I think that it's stigmatized, unfortunately, because I've seen it do amazing good for a lot of our patients.
People might have a stigma about going to different programs, but you go to whatever program works for you. They can say whatever they want to say, but it saved my life. It saved my life.
You're putting something in your body, but I'm under a doctor's care. I'm regulated. I don't overdose. I don't abuse it.
It's a tool just like any other tool. There are a couple MATs out there now, and the more tools we have at our disposal, the better. And the more we have personalized care, the better people do.
If the individual is doing well, they don't have to come 7 days a week for medicating services. They can begin to be reduced down and receive take-home privileges.
I've gone through going daily for many months, but now I go once a week and I show up for 5 minutes and say hi and pick up and drop off. And then I have a counselor I see about once a month. I see her, and that's always kind of a highlight. It's good to have somebody else to talk to.
And that's really a measure of doing well in treatment when somebody is deemed eligible for take-home privileges.
So it's about how to help people understand the addiction itself and how to identify goals and to go slowly and steadily.
Some people start with the explicit goal of, I want to be out of here in 18 months, I want to be out of here in 24 months, I want to be out of here in 36 months. My usual answer is, let's see. It may be possible, it may not be possible, but let's find out together.
Everybody's experience with addiction is different, so your recovery is going to be different. And what works for one person may not work for another person.
We've had individuals who've been in treatment for in excess of 30 years. They just recognize that a life without this substance isn't possible. And I'm not going to take that away from them. I'm not even going to suggest that should be taken away from them. That would be incredibly foolish. They're productive. They're doing the things that they have to do. How do you describe recovery in an individual with a substance use disorder? I don't know. To be very honest with you, I've been trying for 29 years to define recovery.
Recovery isn't something that happens all at once. It's every day. It's making the next good decision for you.
Recovery is living one day at a time. Just being able to be with your grandchildren, your children, just being able to be sober is very much important.
I just want to get my head to the pillow without using it, even now. I don't care if I have 30 years clean. I want to get my head to the pillow every night without picking up. And if I do that, then I know I had a good day.
Now I have two wonderful children, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they keep me very busy. And I have a wonderful, supportive, loving family who, even though things got rough, they still stood by me in the end. And now I'm working. I'm about 500 projects at once, and I've been on the mayor's task force, and that helped me get into what I'm doing right now, which is project planning for the epidemic. I'm working on a project called Peer Force. We're taking volunteers that have lived experience to help people get into recovery, to help the community heal, and to have people go back and say, I've done it, I've gotten out. They've only ever known recovery mommy, which is something I'm very grateful for. Life's good now, definitely.
John, that was beautifully done and incredibly thought-provoking. I would say of the 4 segments that I saw, this is the one to which I relate most personally.
Ah, really?
Now, yes, I was addicted to something. It was not as life-threatening as opioids, but I was an extremely addictive cigarette smoker. I would literally wake up in the middle of the night to smoke. If I could have figured out a way to smoke while I was smoking, I would have done that. I tried everything: hypnosis, the patch, the gum, the lozenge, programs, remedial programs, and finally, I did quit. I had a lot of information because I had attended all those programs, but what I did in the end was replace them with food. I allowed myself, as a lifelong dieter, I ate cookies, crackers, chocolate-covered graham crackers, candy. For almost a year, I gained 15 pounds, but I never touched another cigarette, and I'm coming up on 10 years.
Oh, well, that's great.
With that. So it really, I could see it very personally. How did you find this particular program?
Well, the other professors who teach the course with me, we're always thinking about future projects that would fit the social justice documentary program. The mission of the program is to shine a light, use the art of film to shine a light on organizations or individuals who are making a positive social change. Well, the opioid crisis had been in the news so much. We certainly had been reading about the awful effects on families, communities. And then it turned into conversations with Hilary Sell, who you saw in the film. She's a social worker, and she's also my wife's sister. So she is my sister-in-law, and we had many conversations about this, and I thought, this sounds like a good fit for the social justice documentary program. So that's what we started with.
And NARP, well, the methadone method has been in use for several decades.
Yes, it has.
Now, Mike makes a comment in the film that methadone, some people call it liquid handcuffs, because one does have to take it every day. It doesn't get people high, but it blocks those receptors to the drugs that do. There's a lot of argument about becoming dependent on another substance, and yet the other side of the argument is everybody's functional, they're still able to work, to be part of the community in a productive way. What's your take on that?
Well, as we explored more and more the issues and the many paths to recovery that there are, we saw medically assisted treatment for the opioid crisis as being a really viable alternative. It may not be the only answer, but for some people, and I think Sarah says it in the film, it was the answer. So here she is 8 years ago, walking around Kensington homeless, a heroin addict, and since she has joined, since she became a part of NARP and started medically assisted treatment, well, she now has a terrific job. She's a certified peer counselor for substance abuse, and she has 2 wonderful children. So she's doing very well. So part of the NARP section of this series of recoveries, we wanted people to see that there shouldn't be a stigma attached to medically assisted treatment, that there are people like Michael and Stephanie and Sarah who are now productive members of the society and living wonderful lives with the aid of medicine. And it is medical professionals who are deciding how much they should have and when they should have it, so that, you know, if someone had hypertension, well, they're taking medicine to treat that. And so that doesn't have a stigma to it. And so we feel that medically assisted treatment for opioid abuse should not have a stigma to it. Not that for some people, you know, there may be other answers, and certainly 12-step programs, which they have at NARP, is a terrific answer for many people. Many other people find that they have to live in a home that is a recovery house. So there's many different answers, and that was kind of the point of this semester, this year's work in deciding to do 4 different episodes about recovery.
To me, it was interesting that each of the 4 really is infused with hope. It is about the positive outcomes that can result from the various types of treatment. Now, everybody in the NARP segment did point out, I believe that Michael, Stephanie, and Sarah all talked about being part of the talk therapy as well, which I have to say, with me with the cigarettes, that was a big deal. And there came a point when I realized, wow, I really do have these tools. I also have the Cheetos, but I have the tools.
Well, that is certainly a big part of NARP, is the talk therapy that they have, and that's an essential part of the recovery that Sarah, Michael, and Stephanie have gone through. So it is trying to look at the whole patient, the whole person who is trying to rid themselves of opioids. So there are, and methadone is not the only medically assisted treatment medication that is used. It's just one of a few that's used. But it is certainly proven effective for some people. Not all, but some.
Do they tend to separate the different drugs that are used in treatment, like are methadone clinics only for methadone?
No, most clinics that are committed to medically assisted treatment will have a few different drugs that they use.
Someone points out in the film, too, that if you're diabetic and you're dependent on insulin, there really is no stigma attached to that.
Correct, yes.
I know currently there's an issue with methadone clinics being set up in various areas, and there's one in South Philly that's kind of in a contentious situation.
Well, that's NARP, is in South Philadelphia. And I think it's understandable that some residents, certainly not all, but some residents and some business owners get nervous when they know that there's a clinic giving out methadone. From what I saw, I think it does so much good for that community, because you have an answer for people who are suffering with addiction. Otherwise, the answer might be crime in order to get money for heroin.
One of the people said something about when you get to a certain level of trust with your treatment, really. Like Sarah, for example, she said, now, some people have to go every single day and pick up the dosage. She had reached a point where she goes once a week. So I guess she turns in the old prescriptions and they give her the new ones, and then she self-administers every day of the week.
Right.
Is that a common situation?
Yes, through the counselors and the medical professionals, they decide when someone is ready for the take-home option. And that can vary. Some people might be ready for that after a few months, some might only be ready for that after they've really shown themselves in the program for a couple of years.
And methadone does not have appeal at being sold. Do people sell it on the street?
It is sold sometimes on the streets.
It is.
That is, that is one of the risks that a place like NARP takes, that they know that it could happen. Now, they have many safeguards to try and make sure it doesn't happen. But if someone walked out of there and had some methadone with them, there's no one following them home. So if they did want to sell it on the street to someone, it's possible. We can't eliminate that possibility.
If people are not on a regular treatment plan with it and they take it, does it get them high as an exhilarating thing like
Well,
drugs?
I
if you're
think from what I understand, and as a PhD, I'm very far from understanding medicine, but from what some people told me, the kind of doses of methadone that people like Sarah are getting, that if I took that, it would kill me. So it depends on, again, it's medical professionals deciding on the dose.
Do people ever graduate from methadone? When one goes on to that kind of a treatment, does one ever graduate, or is that a lifelong dependency?
Again, that depends on the individual. Many people do graduate from methadone and do quite well the rest of their lives taking no medically assisted treatment. Sarah has been on medically assisted treatment for 7 or 8 years now, and she says she's just comfortable with it now. She doesn't know what the future would bring.
Wow. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience about the treatment plan?
Yeah, we hope that the film gives people a sense of hope in that there are great people out there battling the opioid crisis and that there are answers. There's no single answer, but there are answers for pathways to recovery.
There are answers, and if you or anyone you know are looking for answers, we do have some contact phone numbers to give you. Get Help Now hotline, 1-800-662-4357. The Pennsylvania Get Help Now hotline, 717-216-0905. And the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs for Pennsylvania, 717-783-8675. Thanks again for joining us. If anyone in your orbit is struggling with addiction, please don't hesitate to reach out for support and hope. In recovery, there is no one-size-fits-all, but there are many, many options available to aid recovery. My mom used to say, you have to give a miracle a chance to happen, and you've got to get into the arena to give that miracle a chance. Please reach out. I'm Carole Adrienne, and you can explore my documentary series in production, Civil War Medicine, at civilwarrx.com.